Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I was recently browsing one of my favorite YouTube channels, Architectural Digest, and I came across this video here inside Pierce Brosnan's $100 million Malibu beach home. And I thought, well, fantastic. I have to admit, it's one of a guilty pleasure of mine, really watching celebrities' homes. I grew up as a child of the MTV Cribs era, and Pierce Brosnan was also the James Bond of my generation, and the star of one of my favourite films of all time, The Thomas Crown Affair, so I thought, fantastic, I will watch this. And I really enjoyed it. I won't play the video here, of course, but I will link to this Architectural Digest YouTube video, and you can go and watch it for yourself. I highly recommend you do so. But as I was watching the video, I scrolled down to the comments section and I saw some pretty funny comments, all commenting on the price. If I'm buying a $100 million property, my neighbors better be non-existent. $100 million is a tad overpriced considering someone could have an entire island for that. This is definitely not getting $100 mil for this house, and that's a fact. And I thought, well, you know, maybe they have a point. $100 million is a lot of money. So why not go and explore, get familiar with Malibu, and see what we all think about that price tag. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to explore Malibu, which is an area I don't really know. We're going to look at Pierce Brosnan's home in some more detail. We're going to compare it to some other homes on the market, and then make up our minds as to whether it commands the price tag. So if you put Malibu into Google Maps, this is what you'll see. It lies to the west of Los Angeles in California, and Malibu itself sort of occupies this strip of land along the coast here. So it's this coastal region, quite sort of wide, if you will, laterally, but pretty thin, from Topanga Beach there in the east to, well, the Carrillo State Park in the west. And the main arterial route, as you can see here, is the number 1. And of course, Malibu is famous for celebrity homes, being by the beach, and being an attractive area to live that is both outside of Los Angeles, but also close enough to it so that it is in commuting distance. So I figured we would zoom in and have a quick look along the coast here, pick out some of the highlights, and then look at Pierce Brosnan's home in a bit more detail. So starting from the east-hand side here. At this high level, I'll just let the map resume. You can see that there's some houses right on the beach along the Pacific Highway, and that pretty much is the case for most of it. Lots of lovely beaches here, Las Tunas Beach, Big Rock we've got here. Big Rock being this area, it seems, up into the hills north of the Pacific Coast Highway as well. Then we have an area called Las Flores, which is similar to Big Rock, it seems. La Costa Beach. Let's just zoom in a bit further and have a look at some of the homes on this beach. So along the beach here, you see the homes are relatively small, I would say in general, quite thin and narrow, and they occupy these sort of front to back plots, which then go right onto the beach. So you can start to get a sense of why people want to live here. If you're south of the Pacific Coast Highway, you really do get uninterrupted views. North of the highway are hills, so you get this these roads of this kind of layout that's sort of zigzag up the hills, and these larger private properties. I mean, just have a look at this one here. All of a sudden you can start to tell that these are real desirable residences here. This one with the solar panels on, the swimming pool, the tennis court, and so on. These are luxury properties. And one thing I should say, of course, sort of in the early stages of this video, is that in this video we're going to be looking at some pretty incredible places with some extremely high price tags and talking about properties worth tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars in cases. And I think it's fair to say that this is all a bit tongue-in-cheek and we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously here. So the purpose of the video is just to sort of enjoy this and imagine and fantasize about these homes, not really to sort of take it all too seriously. The Sigel House by architect John Lautner I thought was one that sounded really interesting, and if I open this one here, You can see the street view of this house. This is quite a famous house. Even I've heard of this one as an architecture fan. And so looking at the Sigel House, you can see here this amazing sort of interior, huge windows, uninterrupted view straight out to the sea. So that's a very, very famous house. Yeah, kind of architecturally quite quirky and a bit different. So an interesting one to look at. And here we have a slight aerial view, so you can see the properties quite big compared to the one next door to it. So that's the Sigel House, or Sigel House, by architect John Lautner. Zooming along a bit, we have Nobu here. Nobu is a famous sort of Japanese seafood restaurant and hotel. We've got the Malibu Pier. That I thought looked pretty interesting. A historic pier with shops and restaurants. Iconic circa 1905 pier next to the beach with shops, restaurants, fishing, and people watching, I'm sure. So who knows, maybe some celebrities go to relax at the pier. One interesting road I found in Malibu here was this road here, Malibu Colony Road. I'm going to point out something I thought was just striking and a bit interesting about this road. Maybe you won't find it interesting, but it was that the fact that, first of all, on the south side of the road here, the homes are very narrow and thin front to back, and you can see actually in comparison to the north side of the road, there's 2 or 3 properties on the south side compared to the north side. That's one observation. So it really shows that they pack in the properties on the south side of the roads here that are on the beach facing ones. They're clearly more desirable. But another thing that struck me was the number of tennis courts that the properties on the north side of the road have. It's just bizarre. So counting from right to left here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. There's 12 tennis courts there in the space of about, I don't know, maybe 30 properties or less even, which is just bizarre because each tennis court takes up about the space of a plot. So you can imagine the value that would be realized here if all of these tennis court owners sold that land that their tennis courts are on and decided to build homes there. They could presumably sell that land for a lot of money. And why don't they just build, 2 or 3 communal tennis courts and share them by everybody, amongst everybody in the road? I'm just amazed and can only imagine that this Malibu Colony Road here is full of ATP, professional tennis players who must play tennis constantly all the time on their own courts. Because otherwise I would imagine that most people aren't using their courts all the time. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting observation. Just a couple of pinned homes here that I thought were quite interesting. Extremely narrow property here. 23768 Malibu Road. Very thin front to back. So you can see that, these properties go right on the road. And actually, let's drag our man up here and plonk him down there and take a look at these properties. That's a bit strange. I have absolutely no idea what's going on there. Maybe it's being fumigated or something. But you can see the fronts of these properties here really don't look like much. I mean, I think that that's fair to say. They're pretty humble. 2-car garage and maybe something upstairs. But they're quite thin and narrow, and you really sort of would drive by them and not think too much about them, to be honest with you. You wouldn't even notice them, to be honest, if you didn't know. Anyway, we're off the Pacific Coast Highway here, and there is Malibu Road now that goes along the southern side of Malibu, Puerto Beach, and really I get the impression that a lot of these neighborhoods are sort of pretty similar, and there's probably not too much between them. So let's move on down, and we see here now a different side to Malibu. This point here, Point Dume is raised, and so where previously sort of to the east the properties are right on the beach, here the properties are actually on this sort of cliff edge, and so you get a different aesthetic, a different feel, I'm sure, to the properties and so on. And here, if I click on Point Dume, we should be able to learn a little bit about it. Tranquil coastal area, features trails and buff viewpoints, rocky coves and ancient sand dunes. That's right. And if we take a look at the picture here just for a second, we'll see it looks, absolutely fantastic here. You can see why people move. But you see there is a cliff now, so this is a definite sort of rocky outcrop. And homes in this area seem to be raised a bit from sea level, whereas previously they are on the beach. So that is something to consider and remember. Moving up the beach here, we've got Westwood and Zuma Beach, which I thought looked, very nice indeed. I wonder, I put a star down here. What was this for? Run Malibu. Oh, yes. No, there was a helicopter pad here, which I thought was interesting. Part of presumably the Zuma police force. In fact, if you zoom in, I think it does say that. Yes, Los Angeles County Sheriff, Zuma, private. So that is not a helipad for the rich and famous. That is for police purposes only. And moving up the coast here, we get to Trancas Beach. And I think it's around here that Brosnan has his home. If I'll just have to zoom in for a second to find it. No, maybe not. Yes, it's just a bit further along here, the heart. So I've hearted it, of course. This is Brosnan's home. And in fact, if you go and watch the Architectural Digest video, you'll be familiar with its shape. So I thought we'd just look at it from above and compare it to those nearby. So you'll see it's got this U shape here with an outhouse. This is the pool house. The property does have a swimming pool, even though it doesn't look like it. It's here, and in the satellite image it looks like it's not filled with water. You can see the pools next door are filled with water, so presumably it was empty at this time. A lot of the comments under the video noted how close the property is to its next door neighbours, and in fact it is. You can see here there's basically no gap between the property next door. So I think I saw one of them saying, oh, if I paid $100 million, I wouldn't want to smell my neighbour's barbecue. And that is certainly the case. If somebody was barbecuing here, presumably you could smell it. So yes, here we are. This is his home. And I thought one interesting thing to do would be to put our man here on Broad Beach Road and just take a look at the front of the property. So this is it here. You don't really see this in the video, but you can see we're on this relatively quiet looking street here. This is not the main highway that goes through Malibu, so that is presumably an important selling point that the realtor would want you to know if you were buying this house, is that you don't get the main traffic going by, you are off. So yeah, beautiful carved wooden gates here, fits with the sort of tropical Southeast Asian vibe that I think the Brosnans are going for. You can see some lime trees here, I think they are, and so on. One interesting point to note are all the sandbags outside his main gate. Presumably this is to stop water flowing through them. Whether that is from the beach side onto the road or from the roadside onto the house, I have absolutely no idea. But one thing to note is certainly you'll be dealing with some flooding if you pay $100 million for your next home, which is probably no good. And there's a pedestrian gate here as well, which is also sandbags. So not quite sure what's going on there. It seems maybe they have some flooding problems. And they've grown some bamboo along the front, maybe for privacy. And who knows, perhaps Pierce sits out here and has a coffee in the morning and watches the world go by. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's one interesting thing to note. It also looks like you'll be living next to some... Well, no, I thought that was a construction site, but possibly not. But again, the neighbour's property here, sandbagged. So presumably this area floods, which is maybe why they are moving. So for $100 million, would you want to pay that for a house that floods? I don't know. It also looks like there's kind of no real place to put the bins. So you must presumably be looking at those every time you arrive or leave. So anyway, some points to consider there, but on the pros side, you are definitely right onto the beach. I mean, you can walk out of your bedroom, go downstairs, walk out the front door here, and you see the beach straight away, and you are in the water. So that really is fantastic, and presumably is a huge selling point there for the home. You can see the Pacific Coast Highway just a few feet away, but you're definitely not on the highway, and that presumably means it's a much more favorable place to live because you aren't putting up with the noise and traffic and so on. Moving further west, it's much of the same. There are some absolutely gorgeous homes here on the cliff. I mean, if I just zoom in for a second, more cliffs here, so these homes are raised, and you can see some absolutely ginormous properties. And perhaps it's time to turn our minds to, if Pierce Brosnan is asking $100 million for his property on the beach there. Is it really worth it? Do you think so? I mean, to me, it looks like a relatively small patch of land, probably an acre or two. Whereas these homes here on the coast, up the cliffs a bit, and not too far from his house, really are much bigger. And so, it gets you thinking, well, what is it that you are paying for? If I zoom along a bit further, you can see some grand homes here. And yes, I starred one down here. That's right. I mean, I thought, look at this home here. This is a serious property. Much, much bigger than Pierce Brosnan's. Probably 10, 20 times the land area. On the cliff, so you're raised up a bit, with a private access to the beach you can see here, and so on. So I thought, well, this is starting to look like $100 million. And all of a sudden, I'm not sure, what Brosnan's is really. So anyway, that brings us pretty much to the edge of Malibu here. I'll just repin it. And you can see we've traveled, the length of Malibu here from east to west. So we've seen, Tennis Court Street, I'll call it, Point Dume, and Pierce Brosnan's home, to name but a few. I'll just look at Pierce Brosnan's home in more detail. I found it on Zillow here, and it's this top result for Malibu, California real estate. If I look here on Zillow, you'll see $100 million. I mean, that's quite something. It's just loading up, and there we go. You'll see more of this, of course, in the video from Architectural Digest, but this is the main image here, and doesn't it look fantastic? A really beautiful, light, airy, glassy home. Right on the beach here with some sand in the garden, this paved area, the pool you can see in the background there, and the extension house. This is looking west, so you can see the neighboring properties here all lined up, but presumably this beach is public, but I don't know, perhaps it's not very busy most of the time. You can certainly sunbathe by yourself here, and this is a good aerial view, just like the one that we've seen already, but the image is even clearer, to be honest. So yeah, you can see the lovely courtyard in here and so on, but also, again, right next door to the neighbor, so not sure about that. And as we know, it floods now, so I won't click through all of these, but just to give you a sense, this is the interior. It's got a lovely clean look, so I can see why many people would want to move in here. And I thought one thing that was worth noting as well is the square footage, because of course you need to compare property sizes if you think the property is going to be worth it. So I've got here 13,000 square foot for Brosnan's home, and if you do the maths, that comes out at $7,700 per square foot. So just remember that number, $7,700 per square foot. I thought one interesting thing to do would be to compare that to the Global Living City Guide by CBRE, which is a real estate organization. If you scroll down here to the second or third page on this report, there's a list of cities and the comparative property prices in them as an average. This is in pounds, but you can see the top of the list is Hong Kong, £908 per square foot. And if you do the conversion, you'll realize that is approximately, in today's value, $1,230 per square foot on average. So for the most expensive city in the world, Hong Kong, an average price, $1,230 per square foot. Pierce here is commanding $7,700 per square foot. So you're talking six times higher than the most expensive city in the world. So that is quite something, really, isn't it? And out of interest, London there on the list is $890 per square foot, and I think the New York one is $730 or so. So $730 per square foot. Again, today's prices. So there you go. You can see that there's lots of properties for sale here on Zillow. So we're going to zoom around a bit more here now, actually, and start looking at some comparative properties to Brosnan's, and we'll see, what's going on in the property market, because it is a little strange. So the fun thing about Zillow is that it does give you price estimates for properties that are not on the market, either based on, recent sales data or just comparable prices nearby. And you can see here we've got Brosnan's home on the beach, $100 million right there. That's quite something indeed, isn't it? Just down the road here, we've got same road, Broad Beach Road, $42 million. And this this property here is 13,475 square foot. So it's twice the size of Pierce Brosnan's home. You can see it's a different feel, this sort of Spanish look and feel and so on and so forth. But it's right on the beach, similar to Brosnan's. It's got, huge garage. I'm sure it's, a lovely home inside. And the taste, well, the architectural style is to each their own. But for $42 million, by comparison, this is a bargain to Pierce Brosnan's home, and it's also twice the size. So you start to think, well, if this is twice the area and it's under half the price, it's really sort of 4 or 5 times more valuable than Pierce Brosnan's home. So it gets you thinking, doesn't it? Is it really worth it? And if you scroll down on Zillow here, you can see some interesting figures. Estimated market value, 37 million. And it's jumped up here. It's jumped in 2020, and that makes you think, well, why has it jumped? That's not because house prices in this area went up, over double overnight, but it's just because it was listed then and previously was tracking at this $20 million mark. And if you look at the price and tax history here, listed for sale 2020 for $42 million, where it was sold in the year 2000 for under $3 million. So somebody bought this home in the year 2000 for under $3 million, and now 20 years later they're selling it for $42 million, which is absolutely an astonishing increase, and really outweighs all sort of inflation or cost of living adjustments or whatever you want to throw at it. Really, it's just a ginormous increase. So you can see that when people are putting properties on the market, they really are shooting high. Now here, by comparison, some properties north of the Pacific Coast Highway, 2 bedrooms, 3 baths, 1,800 square feet, going for $1.5 million, which is still, by all accounts, far above the average price of properties in the United States and globally. But you can see here a much more modest home, still commanding an enormous price tag in Malibu. So even the homes in the hills are worth a lot of money. But, by comparison to Brosnan's, absolutely nothing really. So yeah, an interesting one. I thought I would zoom along here to the property that I saw earlier, and I wonder if it has an estimated price in it that could help us out, and we'll see what those go for. If I switch to satellite view, we should be able to figure out exactly where we are. I think a bit further along here, and I'll compare this to the property that we saw earlier. Yes, here we go. This was it, wasn't it? You can see here a much greater land area on top of this hill, and Zillow here has got an estimated price of $31 million. The Zestimate, they call it. As you can tell, I love looking at these things. So the Zestimate is $31 million. The other property we saw down the road from Pierce's house was $40 million or thereabouts. Pierce again commanding $100 million for his home, which is just absolutely amazing. This house is 15,000 square foot, so even bigger than the second home we saw. It's got 14 bathrooms, which is amazing. I can't imagine how anybody would require so many bathrooms at all. But if we look at the price and tax history, we can see here that this one sold again back in 2000 for $27 million. So it's a much, much bigger property. The plot area, which isn't listed here on Zillow, you can tell is several orders, maybe an order of magnitude larger than the other properties we saw. And this went for $27 million in the year 2000, whereas the other one went for under $3 million, didn't it? So that was a huge difference already. And you can see here then $31 million doesn't sound like a huge increase. You could imagine that over 20 years, a property of this kind of caliber might increase by that price. So 31 starts sounding a bit more reasonable. And this isn't for sale, that is just a Zestimate. So I'm sure if the owner of this home put it on the market now, they would go a lot higher than $31 million. But how high would they go? I mean, if I look at this property from above here, on the cliff, private beach, better views, probably doesn't flood like Pierce's home, that to me looks like a $100 million property, whereas Pierce Brosnan's home all of a sudden does not. We can see here, in fact, on the market for $65 million, a property just a bit further along. So let's zoom into that and take a look. How does this compare? We've got here 33256 Pacific Coast Highway, for $65 million and only 5,000 square foot now, so smaller than Pierce Brosnan's home, but also commanding just 2/3 of the price. Different architectural style, of course, so to each their own. Some people might like it and some people might not, and that is just a personal preference thing. So can't really comment on that. This is a little more sort of, architectural and angly, and looks a bit more perhaps 70s style, I should say. But it's got a huge garden and is again a much bigger plot than Brosnan's. So perhaps a better deal still. Who knows? But yes, for $65 million, again, an enormous saving. I mean, that saves you, $35 million for you to go and buy other properties around the world and enjoy yourself otherwise. So yeah, I'm not sure if Pierce's property here is stacking up all of a sudden. It looks like there are cheaper properties on the market which are bigger nearby. And that's really it. So it makes you think, well, what are they commanding otherwise? I wonder if we zoom back, we could see the historic prices of Pierce's home, and perhaps not, because I think it does say on the Architectural Digest video that he built it, or at least perhaps extensively refurbished it. So there, yes, year built 2000. So it was not previously built, and it does not have a history. So I believe he was the original builder of this home and has now listed it for sale some 20 years later. So there we go. One other interesting site I thought I'd take a look at, of course, if we skip over the CBRE one there, just back to Malibu here, is if we go into Beverly Hills and you think, well, why might someone want to pay all this money for a home in such an area as Malibu? Think about Pierce Brosnan and the sorts of candidates who might be looking to buy his house. A prestigious actor, he'll be traveling into Los Angeles presumably every day to do his acting or run his business. And there are other homes, of course, available in Beverly Hills, so I thought we'd take a look at just one and compare it and see how it compares to Malibu and to Brosnan's home. So I found one here, if I zoom in, Nemes Road in Los Angeles. So if we zoom in here, you can see you're up in the hills, a absolute classic looking Beverly Hills home with these swoopy roads, private driveways, and south facing lots that look over the city of Los Angeles. And the website that I saw this listed on was joyceray.com. Joyce Ray is, by all accounts, one of the most premier real estate agents in Los Angeles. She sells some of the most luxurious and amazing homes in this area. Nemes Road, you can see that this sold for $85 million just a year or two ago, I think. So it's, by all accounts, again, one of the most, these are expensive properties, absolute fabulous luxury and so on. You can see the style, again, is very different. But if you look at this home, it really is just a really classical looking piece of architecture, that's for sure. And for $85 million, you might want to know the lot size here, 95,000 square foot, and the living area, 35,000 square foot. So that is 3 times the size of Pierce Brosnan's home now. So we're talking an absolutely ginormous home. But again, at 3 times the size of Pierce Brosnan's home, it only sold, in inverted commas, for $85 million, so cheaper still. And it's in the heart of Los Angeles, in the Holmby Hills, which some might argue, for a convenience point of view, wanting to be near the city and so on, is a better place to be. For comparison purposes, that's only $2,500 per square foot, whereas Brosnan's home is $7,500 or $7,700 per square foot. So on a square foot deal, this home is actually 3 times cheaper than what Brosnan is asking for. So that really puts it into perspective, I thought. Where would you rather live? Would you rather live in Los Angeles, up in the Holmby Hills, in an absolutely ginormous 35,000 square foot home for $85 million? Or would you rather spend $15 million more for a home that is 3 times as small, but out in Malibu, on the beach, with uninterrupted views, the fresh sea air next to you, but also occasionally the smell of your neighbour's barbecue? Let me know in the comments below. So there you go, something a little different today. I do hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.